So, in general, I thought I'd just lay out a little bit of the criteria relative to the kinds of uses of proceeds that we accept in terms of proposals to invest. We're in the development side, right? So we accept a certain amount of development and technical proof of concepting that has to be rolled out before the company can actually introduce to the marketplace. Thanks, Ryan. The total process of deploying that capital has to include significant allocation to market entry and post-market entries investment in the company's product for, call it the softer costs of, brand development, could be attraction of key personnel to support that market introduction, engineering and feasibility studies that establish the proof and viability within the marketplace. Typically, though, it would exclude a lot of the normal course uses of capital for working capital purposes as a business on a going concern basis. So ultimately, if you're not buying plant and equipment, everything's working capital. But we are specifically targeting working capital for the uses of growing the market base for your company. Just take a little bit of time here to stop on this. The non-dilutive investor is a bridge between the pure grant space and the VC space or the bank debt space, right? So not all of our investments are deployed on the basis that every company we invest in will attract venture capital. That's not the mission. If that happens, great. But we also want to see a company sustain its revenue and growth, even if it's organic. That's a viable business case for us to invest in. So, ultimately, these are companies that have, an initial plan in place, right? And we invest knowing that there will be a lot of changes throughout the deployment of that plan and through the funding milestones that are established on day one, right? But that doesn't mean that you're off the hook, right? If things change and turn out differently halfway through the process. It means that, you have a dialogue for critical evaluation with, in our case, AVAC Limited, and our investment team to better understand the changes that have occurred in the plan and to assess if the right direction should be taken in terms of status quo, in terms of specific changes in the business, or if that, the natural inclination of the founding management team is to go a certain direction. There's an ongoing process of evaluation that occurs there. And in fact, AVAC has the option to, limit and terminate the funding, right? That's a very real decision that we can make. And the interesting thing is that on a track record basis, going through that process and interacting with management over the course of a 1 to 2 year period as those milestones are being met, what we've realized is that success is correlated to the ability for management to be open and interactive with the investor. And we approach that process very much like an investor would with a purely equity and purely financially driven, motivated basis would, but that there is key considerations in whether or not we wish to deploy our full investment commitment. Okay, and so, we can provide, other avenues and pathways to investors, to expertise that you may need. We can also act as references for your company and your management team because we get canvassed a lot by the investment community and other people looking to do business with your company. One thing I should mention is that in my last 5 to 7 years of involvement with the early stage venture community, I noticed an increasingly and highly interactive network and cohesiveness between granting agencies, AVAC, the venture community, and there's a very tight circle of discussion that happens, right? And I think what most entrepreneurs or some entrepreneurs don't realize when they interact with AVAC and they get asked for, some reporting requirements that are, ostensibly for AVAC, they don't realize that this is necessarily starting to build out their management processes that provide them for a pathway of moving the business into a professionally managed situation, and where AVAC is prepared to vouch for that capacity and for that effort. So, on that basis alone, we do we do provide much more than the dollars associated with the initial funding. And because we get paid on a royalty basis, we have motivations to ensure that happens. This is just a summary of the investments. As I mentioned, a lot more has happened in 2008 than 2009. But with next year's allocation hopefully coming forward from the province, we'll be able to talk to more of you proactively. And I would say that now's the time to speak with AVAC, because what tends to happen is when the funding's announced, you get a deluge of opportunities, and you want to be early in the due diligence pipe so that we can understand your deal to the best possible degree. And so with that, I'll just take a question or two. I'm sure there's a couple.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Yeah, yes, sir, in the back.
What are your typical funding amounts that you do for companies? I know there's those are different stages, but typically, is there a typical number?
There is a typical range. We'll do as small as $25,000 matching increments for sort of a key validator or an opportunity to answer a question that then would precipitate maybe more substantial follow-on investment by AVAC, and that would be sort of 25 up to 50%, so $50,000 on the idea builder side, it's called. But typically our investments on the pre-commercial stage are in the $500,000 to $1.5 million range on a more or less matching basis. That varies in terms of degree, and we're flexible in terms of the match, right? So the match can come from grant sources, equity. We'll consider debt as a matching capacity, because ultimately in the early stage company, somebody's on the hook for it, right? And so there's a way to mix that. The strongest investment case, though, is not to have all grants as the matching dollars, right? But there are exceptions. We can do larger, but that would be roughly the range. Peter.
If one of your companies gets acquired, how do you deal with the return-based part of it?
There is there's a couple avenues. Sometimes the venture syndicate doesn't want to have a drain on cash flow from a royalty perspective, right? So normally what's proposed is that we convert our royalty into an equity position. However, we're limited on doing that, right? We can't do that by the nature of our funding agreement. We have the basis for early payout. We have certainly latitude in amending and addressing, the royalty issues relative to what specific concerns might be at play. We're flexible in that regard,
But if you get one of your companies gets acquired by Bigco,
yep.
What does that trigger in terms of a return to you? How does that mechanism work? Bigco's going to say, I'm not paying you any royalty anymore, I've acquired you.
You can buy us out. So
there's a mechanism.
So yeah, right. So up to 2x of the amount pre-advanced. So typically by that time that happens, we've advanced our full tranche, series of tranches, and then we would get paid out on a 2x.